The horse stopped before Elias Graves told it to. Cold wind rolled down from the timberline and cut across his face like a blade. Below him sat Sulfur Creek, a scatter of crooked buildings pressed against a gray Montana valley. Smoke from the mine shafts stained the sky darker than it already was. The place did not look like a town. It looked like something wounded and left to rot. That was why he chose it. Elias sat still in the saddle, hands resting on the horn, his body stiff from 3 long weeks of riding north, 3 weeks of putting miles between himself and Dodge City, between himself and the badge, between himself and the blood that would not wash off his memory. No one here knew his name, and if they did, it would not matter. He rode down the frozen track toward town. The road was nothing but ruts locked in ice. Half the buildings along Main Street were boarded up. The other half leaned like tired men who had given up standing straight. He passed the saloon. Laughter spilled out, sharp and sour. He did not look in. He tied his horse outside the general store and stepped inside. The place smelled of tobacco, flour, and old wood. A man with a face like dried leather looked up from a ledger. "Looking for something?" "A place," Elias said. His voice was rough from disuse. "Away from town." The man spat into a tin cup. "Got a claim northwest. Shack on it. Previous owner left, or died. Depends who you ask." "I'll take it." "You don't want to see it?" "Just the paper." Elias paid in cash. Greenbacks and a few gold coins. The storekeeper counted twice, but asked no questions. Money did not ask about a man's past. 2 miles out, the shack stood alone on a rise of barren land. The porch sagged. 3 window panes were broken. Wind pushed through the logs like it owned the place. Elias stepped inside. 1 room. A cold stove. A straw tick in the corner. It was perfect. He spent the first week working in silence. He hauled pine from the timber with a hatchet and a rusted saw. He patched the roof, re-chinked the walls with mud and straw, replaced glass with oiled canvas, dug a latrine through ground hard as iron. He worked until his hands bled and his shoulders burned. At night, he slept with his coat on and his Colt revolver under his saddle. He woke often, sometimes with his hand already wrapped around the grip, sometimes hearing gunshots that were not there. He had come to Montana to bury the past, but the past slept light. On the 10th day, he saw her. He was on the roof, hammering down fresh shingles, when he noticed movement east of his land. A 1/4 mile away stood another homestead, smaller than his, smoke rising thin from the chimney. A woman was outside, hanging laundry in the wind. The gusts were cruel, snapping the sheets like flags. She wore a plain wool dress, no hat, dark hair pulled tight at the back, though strands whipped loose across her face. She fought the wind with quiet fury, pinning each sheet with force, shoulders set, alone. Elias stopped hammering. She must have felt his eyes. She turned. For a long second she stared at him, a dark shape against the sky. No wave. No nod. No welcome. Her face was pale and shut tight. Then she turned back to her work. The message was clear. Keep your distance. That suited him. 3 days later, he ran out of nails and kerosene. He saddled his horse and rode back into Sulfur Creek. This time the saloon was louder. Miners crowded the bar, faces gray with dust and whiskey. Elias kept his head down inside the store. He gathered nails, salt, and 2 tins of kerosene. As he waited, the room shifted. "That's him," someone muttered. "The new one. Bought the Miller place." "He's next to the Widow Bell," another voice chuckled. "That one's trouble." Elias did not turn. "Heard she's cold as winter." "Not what old Silas said." Heard she was real warm for him. A laugh. Funny how he dropped dead one night, strong as an ox. Then sudden chest pains. Stew must have been seasoned wrong. More laughter. Elias felt the heat rise in his gut, the same heat that had once cost him everything. He crushed it. He paid and walked out without a word. The widow Bell. Corabel. He thought of her standing in the wind, not cold, guarded. The wolves came on a moonless night. He heard the chickens first. Screaming, then the wet snarl. He was moving before he thought, rifle in hand, boots half on. He ran across frozen ground toward her property. She stood on her porch holding a lantern, light shaking. "Get inside!" Elias shouted. A massive gray wolf tore at the chicken coop. Another circled. He dropped to one knee and fired. The shot cracked through the valley. One wolf collapsed. The other fled into darkness. Silence followed. Thick and ringing. He approached the coop, feathers and blood everywhere. She stood frozen on the porch. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. They buried the dead chickens before dawn. The ground was stone. He swung the pickaxe while she shoveled. They did not speak. When the grave was filled, she finally looked at him. "Thank you, Mr. Graves," she said. Formal, brittle. In her gray eyes, he saw something deeper than fear. He saw exhaustion. He recognized it. He had seen it in his own reflection. The next morning, he brought lumber and nails to repair the coop. She resisted at first. Then, barbed wire sliced her palm open. He caught her wrist before she could hide it. "Give me your hand." "It's nothing. It'll be infected by morning." He poured carbolic into the wound. She flinched but did not pull away. He wrapped her hand with careful fingers. "You'll need to keep it clean," he said. She watched his hands, steady and scarred. "I could have done it," she whispered. "I know." He rebuilt the coop stronger than before. The next morning, 2 white eggs sat on his fence post. The day after, he left a dressed rabbit on her porch. No words, just survival. Snow came early that year, heavy and merciless. It swallowed the land, buried fences, turned the world into white silence. Food grew scarce, supplies thinner. One night the storm screamed so loud it shook the shack. Elias sat alone in the dark, ghosts clawing at his mind. He heard Dodge City in the wind. He saw his brother Jacob bleeding in the dust. He saw the boy he had shot 6 times. He was going to die here alone, buried under snow and shame. Then he thought of her, alone in her cabin. He tied a rope to his door and to his waist, and stepped into the blizzard. It took him an hour to cross land that usually took minutes, snow up to his chest, wind that stole breath from his lungs. He found her porch by touch. He pounded on the door. She opened it. He collapsed at her feet. "The blood," he muttered. "So much blood." She dragged him inside. Her cabin was warm. She stripped off his frozen coat, forced hot coffee into his hands. He fell asleep on her floor, and in the middle of the night, as he shivered, she saw the scars on his shoulder. Old bullet wounds. She understood then. He was not running from nothing. He was running from himself. And for the first time in years, neither of them was alone in the dark. The storm did not end gently. It stopped like a slammed door. Morning came gray and hard. Snow stood in walls around the cabin, higher than the fence posts, swallowing the world whole. Elias woke on the braided rug in Corabel Bell's cabin, a heavy wool coat tucked around his shoulders. Not his coat. He knew whose it had been. Silas Bell's. Shame burned hotter than the stove. He pushed himself up, joints stiff, lungs aching from cold and ghosts. Corabel stood at the small counter, already dressed, already steady. Coffee steamed between them like a truce. "There's no path out," she said without turning. "You'll freeze before you reach your door." He sat. They drank in silence. By noon they were digging together. Snow packed thick as stone. Elias broke the crust with a pickaxe. Corabel followed with a shovel. They carved trenches from her door to the woodpile, then to the well. Their breath rose in white plumes. Their hands blistered. They did not talk. By nightfall, they had cut a narrow path to his shack. That evening, she knocked on his door. She held a bowl of stew. "I made too much." He let her in. From that night on, they shared a fire. It was practical at first. One stove, less wood, fewer trips through deep snow. But practicality has a way of turning into something else. They began to move around each other like people who had memorized the same room. She would leave mended shirts on his porch. He would stack kindling by her door, eggs for rabbit, pickled beets for split logs. The silence between them was no longer cold. It simmered. One afternoon, she found him behind his shack, kneeling by a small fire. In his hand was a tarnished silver badge pinned to black leather. She watched as he held it in the flames. The metal curled, blackened, melted. "It was from Dodge," he said without turning. "Deputy Marshal." He poked the coals until the star collapsed into a shapeless lump. "I swore to protect," he said. "All it brought was death." He did not look at her. "I killed a boy," he added. "After the fight was done. After my brother was already gone. He wasn't a threat." His voice did not shake. "It was murder." The fire hissed as he kicked snow over it. Corabel stepped forward and held out a loaf of warm bread. "Some things," she said quietly, "are too heavy to carry." Their fingers brushed. The air changed. The first touch came by accident. He was lifting a sack of flour in her kitchen. She turned too quickly and bumped into him. His hand shot out to steady her, landing on her hip. Warm through wool. She froze. He pulled back as if burned. "Sorry." "It's the floor," she said, voice thin. But they both felt it. The next week, the lamp sputtered out during supper. The room fell into near darkness. Only the stove's red glow and a small lantern lit the space between them. "You're gentle," she said softly. "No," he answered. "I'm not." "You are, with the wood, with my hand." He leaned forward, face in flickering light. "I'm the man who beat a miner against your wall. I'm the man who emptied his gun into a boy." She did not look away. "I haven't been touched like a woman in years," she whispered. The truth sat heavy between them. He reached across the table and covered her hand. "Then don't call me gentle," he said, "unless you mean it." She turned her hand and laced her fingers through his. He stood, walked around the table, touched her face slowly, giving her every chance to turn away. She did not. The kiss was not soft. It was hungry and careful and aching. It tasted of coffee and wood smoke and months of silence. Then she pushed him. Hard. "I can't," she whispered, backing away. "I can't be someone's property again." The word hung in the air. Property. He saw it then. Not rejection. Fear. Memory. Silas Bell. Elias nodded once and left without another word. For 3 days they did not speak. Bread appeared on his porch. Grouse appeared on hers. The thaw came muddy and gray. He rode to town for supplies. Sulfur Creek had grown meaner. The miners watched him. The one he had thrown against the wall stood near the stove. "Like living off that widow?" a drunken voice slurred. Elias stayed still. "She poisoned her husband." He remained silent. The man spat on Elias's boot. The room held its breath. Elias looked down at the brown stain, then back up. "You're dripping," he said quietly. The man faltered. Elias paid and left. When he told Corabel what happened, she stared at him. "You did nothing?" she asked. "It was just spit." She studied him like she was seeing him for the first time. That night she brought Stu to his cabin. "I tried to leave him," she said suddenly. "Silas." He did not interrupt. "He tied me to the bedpost for a day and a night, ate dinner in front of me, told the town I was unstable so no one would believe me." Her voice broke but did not shatter. "I prayed for him to die," she whispered. "Every night." Elias's jaw tightened. "You buried him," he said finally. "That's justice enough." She did not deny anything. After that, something broke loose between them. They baked bread together, his hands guiding hers through the dough. "You deserve better mornings," he murmured. This time she leaned into him. They held each other in a kitchen that smelled of flour and wood smoke. That night he did not leave. It was not possession. It was surrender. When spring threatened to come, trouble rode in first. Arthur Bell, Silas's cousin. He arrived in a black city suit and a thin, hungry smile. He stood in the general store and announced it loud enough for all to hear. "I'm filing a claim on that land, and an accusation of murder." Sulfur Creek leaned in like it had been waiting. Elias rode back with coffee and fear sitting heavy in his saddlebag. "He's accusing you," he told Corabel. "He's calling for a hearing." She sat slowly. "It's finally come," she said. 2 weeks later, the summons was nailed to her door. The hearing would be held in the land agent's office. The whole town would attend. On the morning of the 10th, she wore her best gray dress, hair pulled tight, chin high. They walked 3 blocks through a silent crowd that watched like crows. Inside the land office, it was hot and packed. Arthur's lawyer painted her as cold, unfeeling, poisonous. Miners testified. She didn't cry at the funeral. Silas said she was unstable. The room nodded. The judge turned to her. "Did you poison your husband?" Corabel stood. For a moment she was stone. Then she broke. "I thought about it," she cried. "Every day I thought about it. When he tied me to the bedpost, when he broke my wrist, when he told everyone I was sick in the head." Gasps rippled. "But I didn't do it," she said through tears. "I just survived him." Silence fell like a hammer. The judge dismissed the claim, dismissed the accusation. The land was hers. It should have been victory. But when they stepped outside, the town did not forgive being wrong. A rock flew from an alley. Elias saw it too late to stop it any other way. He shoved Corabel behind him. The stone struck his shoulder with a sick crack. He did not fall. "Walk," he said through his teeth. They rode home in silence. That night she cleaned the wound. "You bled for me," she whispered. "Because I die," he said, voice rough, "before I see you alone again." She threw her arms around him and wept, and for the first time, neither of them held back. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. The court had cleared her name, but Sulfur Creek did not clear its heart. After the hearing, the town did not apologize. It did not soften. It turned its back. When Elias rode in for supplies, the storekeeper served him without meeting his eyes. The miners went quiet when he stepped inside. Prices doubled. Credit vanished. They were not forgiven. They were exiled. Winter returned like it had unfinished business. March froze hard. Snow crusted over the mud. Game grew scarce. The wolves came closer at night, their howls circling the cabin like a reminder that the world beyond their walls was still hungry. Elias hunted farther each morning, higher into the ridges where the wind cut deep and the snow swallowed his boots. He returned late, sometimes with nothing but frost-bitten fingers and a jaw clenched against failure. One night, he stumbled through the door empty-handed and nearly collapsed. His hands were white, the tips of his fingers blue. "Frostbite," Corabel said sharply. She knelt in front of him without hesitation. She warmed water carefully, not too hot, not too fast. She held his hands between hers and forced life back into them. "You're a fool," she whispered, but her voice shook. "For what?" he muttered. "One stringy buck?" "For us," she said. That was the first time she said it out loud. Us. They adjusted. She taught him how to stretch flour with potato starch, how to mend seams with small, tight stitches, how to save bacon grease for flavor when meat was scarce. He taught her how to hold the shotgun steady, how to brace for the kick, how to breathe before the squeeze. Her first shot missed. Her second missed again. "You're closing your eyes," he said calmly. "I am not." "You are. You're afraid to see what you're doing." He stood behind her, guiding her stance, his hand firm on her shoulder. "Look at the can, nothing else. Breathe out." She fired. The tin can spun off the fence post. She did not flinch. She looked at him. He nodded once. Good. They were no longer hiding from the world. They were building something inside it. One night, while darning his sock, she spoke softly. "We could leave in the spring. Go west. Somewhere new." Elias looked around the small cabin, the patched roof, the stove she kept burning, the table where they had bled and confessed. "And give Arthur Bell the satisfaction?" he asked. "It's not about him." "It is," he said. "If we run, he wins." She watched him for a long moment. "So, we stay." "We stay," he confirmed. "We're not hiding. We're holding." The fire came in April. Elias smelled it before he saw it. The wind carried smoke from town. Not stove smoke, not coal, panic smoke. He stepped outside and saw orange flickering above Sulfur Creek. "Stay here," he told her. "It's not your town," she shouted after him. "I'm not them," he said, and rode. The saloon was already an inferno. Flames leaped into the sky. Embers rained down on the general store and land office. Men shouted useless orders. Buckets of water did nothing. Elias dismounted and took command without thinking. "Forget the saloon," he roared. "Save the roofs." The miners listened. He formed a bucket line. He took the front position. Heat blistered his skin. Smoke burned his lungs. Then a scream cut through the chaos. "My boy!" The storekeeper's wife was frantic. Her son had been sneaking beer in the saloon's back room. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed a wet horse blanket, wrapped it over his head and shoulders, and kicked in the back door. Smoke swallowed him whole. He crawled low, lungs screaming, until he heard a cough. He found the boy under a shelf, trembling. "I've got you," Elias said. He wrapped the blanket around them both and ran blind through flame and falling beams. They burst out seconds before the roof collapsed behind them. He rolled in the dirt, covering the child with his body. Men beat the flames off his shirt. The boy was breathing. Elias took 2 steps. Then the world went gray. He collapsed in the mud. Corabel found him unconscious on a cot in the land office. His hands were burned raw, his shoulder blistered, his lungs filled with smoke. For 2 days she did not leave his side. The town left food and fresh bandages outside the door, but did not enter. On the 3rd night, his breathing grew shallow and wet. "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely, gripping his bandaged hand. "You said you'd die before you saw me alone again. Don't you lie to me now." His eyes cracked open. "Didn't come here to be a hero," he rasped. She leaned closer. "But I found a reason to live," he meant her. Spring came real after that. The river ice broke with a sound like cannon fire. The earth softened. Mud replaced frost. Elias could hold a hammer again. They rebuilt the chicken coop side by side. Planted corn, beans, and squash in dark soil mixed with stove ash. They worked on their knees, hands in dirt, shoulders brushing in the sun. One afternoon, he sat on the porch carving scrap pine with his knife. Corabel watched quietly. When he finished, he brushed away the shavings and held it up. A new nameplate. Bell Graves. She stared at it. A slow smile touched her lips. "We're not ghosts anymore," she said softly. He set the knife aside and took her flour-dusted hand. He turned it over gently and kissed her knuckles. "No, ma'am," he said. "We're home." And for the first time since Dodge City, since rope and bruises and whispers and fire, Elias Graves did not feel like a man burying his past. He felt like a man building a future.